guys, welcome to Christy's Book Corner. I'm your host, Christy Mason, and today's chapter is chapter 7 of Finding Jacob Wetterling by Robert M. Dudley. So chapter 7 is called The Turn. We cannot lose the momentum in this investigation. We're going to sympathetically process all leads and information that comes into finding a resolution. I strongly feel that we're not looking in the right direction. Stearns County Sheriff John Skinner on the 15th anniversary of Jacob's abduction. That's who said that. For the first 14 years following the abduction of Jacob Wetterling, investigators focused their efforts on locating the car that left the tire tracks alongside Jacob's footprints in the Razor's driveway. They sought the public help in finding several vehicles with witnesses had reported seeing the neighborhood in the days and weeks prior. One witness, Dan Razor, had reported seeing a car possibly driven by the kidnapper speed down the quarter-mile-long driveway on his family's farm before making an 180-degree turn near his house and driving off towards 91st Avenue. His account was supported by the presence of fresh tire tracks on the gravel driveway. Bullet hounds had led investigators to what were believed to be Jacob's last footprints, which ended abruptly about 75 yards east of 91st on the driveway. All of this supported the long-standing theory of abduction by vehicle. Investigators believed that all the other unusual or suspicious cars seen in the area had been accounted for over the years. This one unidentified car, they believed, was the key to solving the case. What was unusual, however, was that they did not publicly disclose their search for the vehicle Dan Razor described. The small, dark car with lights close together. To date, the only reference made to the car was in Razor's quote in the October 24th, 1989 St. Cloud Times. Longtime Stearns County Deputy John Skinner became the sheriff in 2003. A change of luck in the Wetterling case coincided with his taking office. In the fall of 2003, a retired U.S. Marshal had met a man, Kevin Hamilton, through a mutual acquaintance. That's hard to say. During their discussion, Hamilton admitted that out of the curiosity, he had driven to the crime scene that night Jacob was abducted. He said there were no officers at the scene when he arrived. All he saw were the bicycles in the ditch. The marshal was shocked by Hamilton's story and assured him that investigators had been looking for him since the day after the kidnapping. Hamilton came forward on October 21, 2003. The shocking new information he provided reinvigorated the case. The revelation that a curious driver had contaminated the crime scene jolted investigators, but at the same time, the case seemed to go cold. It was determined that Hamilton was telling the truth, and he was cleared of involvement. The tire tracks, for years believed to have been made by the kidnapper's car, may eventually have been left by Hamilton minutes after the crime had been committed. In shifting their focus, the investigators then overlooked key pieces of information that would not come to light until another 10 years had passed. Kevin Hamilton told investigators he had been at his girlfriend Gina Phipps' house near Kay's kitchen in downtown St. Joseph the night of the abduction. Several minutes of Phipps' family were also there playing card games. Several members. The family had a police scanner in the kitchen, and shortly after 9:30 p.m., as they were wrapping up the games, they heard a report about boys on bikes at Tom Thumb store. Moments later, they noticed police cars speeding eastbound through town. Hamilton and Phipps went outside, got into her car, and attempted to follow the route the police had taken. Phipps' car was a late model Pontiac Grand Prix and was silver in color. Hamilton drove near the Delwyn Ballroom, but saw no sign of the police cars there. Next, he drove south on 91st Avenue. They drove up over the hill, but there was no sign of any police. They then turned left onto what they thought was a gravel road, but soon realized they were on someone's driveway, the Razor driveway. Seeing that there was nowhere to turn around, Hamilton continued all the way up to the Razor home, and made a sweeping left turn before heading back up the driveway towards 91st. When they reached the end of the road, the couple noticed the bikes in the ditch across the street. Directly in front of them, Hamilton said he thought about getting out and picking the bikes up, but decided against it. They drove back to town and stopped at Tom Thumb convenience store. Hamilton noticed that there was a car parked at the store that looked like an unmarked police interceptor. He went inside and saw there were a male store clerk and a male customer in the store, although the female clerk that served Jacob and the other boys was scheduled to work until midnight. Hamilton said he did not see her. He asked the clerk if someone had called the police about kids on their bikes. The customer told Hamilton he was a medical cop and asked if the police should be called. Hamilton was caught off guard by the customer's odd comment and left the store. As the couple drove back to Phipps' house, Hamilton saw a St. Joseph police car parked by Dr. Cotton's dental office. Hamilton pulled into the driveway, got out, and told the officer his name. He told the officer about the bikes he had seen in the ditch at the end of the driveway. The officer brushed Hamilton off and told him that police already knew about the bikes. Hamilton then backed out of the driveway and drove to Phipps' house. The officer at Dr. Cotton's office and was luckily waiting there to escort the Wetterlings the rest of the way home. Fortunately, he did not report his encounter with Hamilton to anyone, so the presence of another vehicle at the crime scene remained unknown for the next 14 years. Hamilton told investigators something else that was interesting. Phipps' Grand Prix had a brand new set of tires installed at a local Goodyear shop 1 week earlier. In another unusual twist to Hamilton's tale, he said that about a week after the abduction, he drove by the crime scene again, this time during daylight hours. As he was leaving, heading north, he was certain that he saw the medical cop and his police interceptor type vehicle again. Hamilton said he and the man locked eyes as they passed by each other. Hamilton later said that during his interview, investigators told him they wanted him to come back to look at some photographs and possibly identify the medical cop. He was disappointed they never followed through with the photo lineup, because it felt the man may have been involved in the kidnapping or may have witnessed something. Hamilton's story may have explained the fresh tire tracks in the Razor driveway, but the car he was driving did not match the description of the car seen by Dan Razor. Still, with Razor, is it Razor or Razor? Still, with the source of the tire tracks not clear in the eyes of investigators, they concluded there was a strong possibility that Jacob's abductor had been on foot, and if he was on foot and on a dead-end road, It was therefore likely that the predator lived nearby. No doubt this new piece of information has renewed interest in the case. Sheriff Sanner noted, "It's blown new investigative life into it. We've got something fresh." SCSO Captain Pam Jensen and BCA Agent Ken McDonald revealed a number of pieces of evidence in January 2004. They listened to the original 911 call Merle Jerzak made on the night of Jacob's abduction. They keyed on what Aaron Larson said, that the boys did not see a car at the abduction scene. They reviewed Dan Razor's November 1989 interview under hypothesis. Hypnosis. Hypnosis! Oops. Hypnosis. Nothing. His unusual reaction to questions about the car he said he saw and about Jacob Wetterling. Razor broke down crying during some portions of the interview. Lastly, Jensen and McDonald reviewed the information from Kevin Hamilton. What was missing from the reasoning Jensen and McDonald had followed to the abduction on foot? There was a review of the tire tracks found in the driveway at the point where the bloodhound lost Jacob's scent. Over the course of the investigation, several cars had been cleared of involvement, passed on tire tread patterns on tire size. There was no indication investigators had considered the tire size or tread pattern of the car Hamilton was driving when they concluded that Jacob had been abducted on foot. It was an oversight that would not come to light for many years to come. Jensen and McDonald interviewed Dan Razin at a CSCO on February 7th, 2004. The interview with Razin was made from the standpoint of eliminating the car Razin claimed that he witnessed. Razin was questioned as to why his dog, Smokey, would not have been barking during the abduction that occurred at the end of his quarter-mile-long driveway. Jensen and McDonald suggested that Razor might have caused the noise in the grass that Aaron Larson heard. They suggested that the 911 operator may have been leading the boys into saying the abductor had a gun and spoke in a raspy voice. They repeatedly accused Razor of kidnapping Jacob. He insisted each time that the abductor must have been driving the car he saw that night. On February 12, 2004, Agent MacDonald and Stearns County investigator Troy Jansky visited the Razor farm. They spoke to Robert and Rita Razor, telling them that their son, Dan, was considered a suspect in Jacob's kidnapping. They researched the family computer but found nothing of concern. Later that month, Sheriff Sanner disclosed publicly for the first time that investigators had interviewed a neighbor and possible suspect in the kidnapping. It's a real possibility that our suspect lives within the general vicinity of the abduction. Sanner said, "We're rethinking the entire scenario. The abduction could have occurred with the predator on foot." Sanner noted that investigators had interviewed hundreds of potential suspects over the years and cautioned that the questioning of this particular suspect should not be viewed as significant. Just prior to going public with the new information, CSCO officials met with the Wetterlings to discuss the new direction of the investigation. This new series of events was just one among many the family had seen over the years. There had been countless leads, false sightings, new suspects, and promising tips. What was different this time was that it marked the first time a significant turn in the case had been made public. Patty Wetterling was cautiously optimistic. "We've had a lot of significant leads about sightings," she said, "but you just can't throw all your eggs in one basket. I don't get a gut feeling or a sense that we're closer, but there's new energy to it." The idea that someone local could have abducted Jacob Wetterling sent another shock wave through St. Joseph. This startling realization that the kidnapper could have lived near the crime scene renewed feelings of uncertainty in the community. "I think people are wondering and thinking back. It's hard to believe that it could be someone local," said St. Joseph resident Bud Rubber. "People are wondering who it could be. They're thinking back to the people who lived there at the time. You just never know." With the new focus on the likelihood that a neighbor could be involved, Patty appealed to the public for information from a different perspective. After the abduction, investigators had gone door to door asking if anyone has seen anything unusual. What they're asking now," she said, "and what I'm asking is for people to talk about the unusual. Who was usually around? Who was usually there on a Sunday night? We are more convinced that this occurred by somebody local, someone on foot," Sheriff Sander asked. "We are more convinced of that now ever have been." Retired Sheriff Jim Costa Riva, who had been chief deputy from Jacob was kidnapped and remained involved with the case for the rest of his career, wasn't so sure. "I don't know if you could call it a gut instinct," he said, "but I always had a feeling that this one could be cleared." Costa Rica acknowledged that Kevin Hamilton's story offered an innocent explanation for the tire tracks in the Razor driveway, but he distanced himself from the on-foot theory pushed by Sander. Costa Rica still believed there was a vehicle involved, explaining that it would have been difficult for the abductor to disappear with Jacob so quickly on foot. But information Hamilton provided had brought the case back to public, and Costa Rica felt they were the ones who could help solve it. Everett Doolittle had been an investigator with the Minnesota BCA since the beginning of the case. In 2004, as the 15th anniversary of Jacob's abduction neared, Doolittle pointed out that going back to the beginning of the investigation was a common method for solving older cases. He advised certain investigators to go back and re-examine all the information, looking for links that hadn't been made earlier, taking a second look at suspects who had been previously cleared, but perhaps should not have been. Doolittle Cold Case Unit of the BCA had utilized the same methodology to solve two major murder cases, including the 1992 murder of Linda Jensen and Big Lake, and the 1978 slayings of Alice Huling and her 3 children in Fairhaven Township. In almost every case, the person told someone. Doolittle said the answer is out there somewhere. The key is to find it. Time becomes your friend, for that, not your enemy. Former BCA agent Dennis Sigelfus had been assigned to the Wetterling case in 1989. In light of the new development, Sigelfus revealed his perspectives with regards to the investigative efforts. "My deal has always been start in the neighborhood and stay in the neighborhood, unless something takes you out of the neighborhood," Sigelfus said. "If there was no car, then obviously we would have been in there even harder. Maybe a hell of a lot more could have been done." Retired Wetterling Task Force Detective Neil Niedermeyer, who worked the case for 5 months, added that Jacob's kidnapping was a crime of opportunity, probably led by by a fantasy in the back of the abductor's mind. Although investigators did not state so publicly at the time, the neighbor they were taking a closer look at was Dan Razor. Patty Wetterling wrote a personal letter to him later in 2004. According to Razor, the letter appeared to have come through the Stearns County Sheriff's Office. In it, she asked him to please come forward to admit that he committed the abduction and to tell investigators what had happened on the night of Jacob's abduction. Razor did not acknowledge a response in any way to the letter, and the information in it would not be publicly known until several years later. Following the 2004 search of the farm, Razor said the BCA asked him at one point to confess to the crime, telling him that during his 911 call he sounded much too nervous to simply be concerned about someone stealing his firewood. Razor said he laughed at the request. For investigators, the contention that Razor sounded nervous during his 911 call would later prove to be a thorn in their side. In 2013, it was revealed by an investigative reporter that they had neglected to save the tape of Razor's call. A new computer-generated age progression image Jacob was released in the fall of 2004. The face looks very familiar to the employees of Marvin Windows of Warwood, Minnesota, who called authorities claiming it resembled one of their co-workers. When questioned, he denied he was Jacob Wetterling and refused to submit to DNA testing, but his fingerprints were all on file in Arizona, and he was eliminated. While Stearns County investigators were piecing together the new theory of the abduction, Jared came forward to share the story of what happened to him in Cold Springs. He told Twin Cities television station KARE 11 that he believed that his abductor and Jacobs were one and the same. A two-part series of news reporters highlighted similarities between the cases. KARE 11's coverage of Jared's story, production, a flurry of topic tips from the public. Nothing he is saying on TV is actually anything we didn't already know, Sanders said of Jared. The only benefit of seeing it in what he's doing to rejuvenating interest in a very cold case. As Jared went public with his story, Sanders was downplaying possible links. While he acknowledged the cases had some similarities and that these had been considered from the beginning of the Wetterling investigation, he cautioned that the links were weaker than previously believed. The similarities are there and you cannot go beyond that, he said. But are they really and truly connected? Until we get a resolution, I don't know that we can answer that with any certainty. Investigators kept their eyes on Dan Razor, setting up surveillance on him from October 15th through October 19th of 2007. On November 7th, Agent Ken McDonald applied for and was granted a mail cover through the U.S. Postal Service to monitor Razor's mail. Nothing unusual was intercepted during the 4-week review. The investigation took another unusual twist in December 2008 when police searched the Milwaukee home of Vernon Sitz following his death. Sitz, often Vernon, owned Vernon's barbershop in the southwest Milwaukee suburbs of St. Francis. He had come to the attention of the Milwaukee Police Department after his psychiatrist said Sitz told her in November 2008 that he wanted to confess to killing a boy in 1959. Sitz died a month later before police had an opportunity to interview him about the possible killing. When police searched Sitz's home, they discovered an eerie trough of materials in the basement related to the Jacob Wetterling and to other missing children, items including child pornography, children's clothing and shoes, posters and videotapes of missing children, tufts of hair, bone devices, books about cannibalism, and a handgun. Some of the clothing had blood and other biological materials on them. Items found in the basement that were related to Jacob, including prints, missing posters, videotapes, and a map of the towns of St. Joseph. A portion of the floor had nearly poured cement, which was jackhammered open, but no additional items of interest were discovered. Outside, investigators found unexplained piles of dirt in the backyard. The dirt was siphoned and tested for evidence of the crime, but nothing was discovered. People who knew Sitz reported that he sometimes talked about his personal reasons for his abiding interest in missing children cases. He claimed he had been abducted himself in 1959. Police investigated Sitz for a possible connection to the Wetterling case, as well as to another abduction from Victoria, Canada in 1991. They found that soon after Jacob was kidnapped, Vernon Sitz made 2 trips to St. Joseph to offer his help to the Wetterling family. After his visits, a wall in his barber shop displayed a laminated poster of Jacob. Patty Wetterling told the St. Paul Pioneer Press that Sitz claimed to be a psychic and had given her a painting of Jacob. She said he seemed to care and that he shared with her that he had good personal reasons for offering his assistance. Sitz's family has asked about his claims of being abducted as a teenager, but they were unable to corroborate his story. At the conclusion of their investigation, police were unable to establish a link between Sitz and any missing children. Analysis of hair and blood samples from Sitz's home provided no connection to any missing children or crime. Investigators reasoned that the hair likely came from customers at his barbershop. No explanation was found for the presence of blood in the home. One of the videos found in Sitz's home was of Jacob Wetterling, taken prior to the kidnapping. It was a startling revelation, seeming to indicate Sitz may have been stalking him. There was a reasonable explanation, however. 1 week before the abduction, Jacob and his classmates made a video of themselves for a class project. Jacob was reciting his list of personal favorites, such as food, movies, etc. The video was aired on television after Jacob was taken. Sitz most likely recorded the broadcast. In January 2009, the Milwaukee Police Department released a statement that Vernon Sitz was not involved in Jacob's abduction or in any other case of missing children. Sheriff John Sanner, whose office had worked with Milwaukee police, concurred with the determination. A fire of the Razor farm on June 4, 2009 destroyed a woodworking shop and a mine shed. Dan Razor reported the blaze at 2:39 a.m., saying that he had been awakened by a noise outside. Robert Razin had been staining some pieces of wood the previous afternoon and put the stained rags in a garbage container outside of the woodworking shop. The State Fire Marshal Division of Minnesota's Department of Public Safety could not determine the case or source of origin. Although the pace of the new leads has slowed to a standstill for several long periods. There remained a sense of urgency about finding not what happened to Jacob Wetterling after 20 years. You would think it would lose its attraction, Sheriff Sanders said. Not this case. I'm not about to say we give up. Indeed, the collective investigative efforts by the FBI, the Minnesota BCA, and SCSO was impressive. They had followed up on tens of thousands of leads and interviewed nearly 8,000 people over 2 decades. Almost done. We got this up to there, still 04. Yet no public known significant arrests have ever been made. An update on the case by the St. Cloud Times newspaper in October 2009 offered a glimpse into the efforts that had been made. SCSO Captain Pam Jensen and BCA Special Agent Ken McDonald were the active investigators at the time. Jensen explained that the investigation continued to take them out of the state of Minnesota, despite the principal theory that the abductor lived near the crime scene. For example, men arrested on charges of child pornography were automatically checked out for possible involvement. Detailed timelines of their activities were created to determine their whereabouts at the time of the kidnapping. The records of every person interviewed over the years were kept in storage and reviewed again from time to time. Reflecting on the beginning of the investigation, Jensen noted that the scope of the search expanded so quickly that it became difficult to manage. She acknowledged that, in hindsight, investigators should have kept their focus on local suspects. As of October 2009, the SCSO indicated they were focused on 5 local suspects. Agent McDonald felt it was likely that the abductor had seen the children on their way home, on the way to Tom Thumb store, and knew they would be coming back the opposite way. The area of the abduction was so remote that it was very unlikely that someone unfamiliar with 91st Avenue was involved. Dan Razor and Patty Wetterling ran into each other in October 2009 at a health club in St. Cloud. Patty asked him if they could talk. Razor agreed to meet with Patty, acknowledging that 20 years was too long to not talk. According to Razor, he and Patty met for about an hour. She asked if maybe he had tried to pull a prank on the boys the night of the abduction, and perhaps something went wrong. He assured her he hadn't attempted any prank and that he had nothing to do with Jacob's abduction. During his meeting with Patty, Razor suggested where a body would be hid on his family farm, saying, "The person in the area who probably did this could have taken Jacob's body and hid it in our gravel pit." But the chance meeting between Razor and Wetterling was not a chance meeting at all. The SCSO had carefully orchestrated it, and Patty was wearing a recording device during their conversation. He told her about the car he saw turning around in his driveway. It was the same story he had told all along. Patty asked several questions. Razor responded to some of them spectacularly, surmising what the abductor may have done with Jacob's body. He suggests that investigators handled the investigation poorly in the beginning. The focus on local suspects that began in 2004 reached a stunning climax on June 30th, 2010. Authorities stormed the Razor farm with a search warrant. For 2 days, Sheriff Sanders invaded media questions about the reasons for investigators' presence on the property. "I do not understand the public is interested in what's going on," he said. I don't want to do anything at this point to compromise any potential prosecution. The FBI, BCA, SCSO, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children were involved in the search. Patty Wetterling expresses approval that investigators had gone back to the beginning of the case for answers. She said that both her family and the Razor family had been traveling on a parallel tracks. Both families wanted answers to what had happened more than 20 years ago. She believed there might be on the verge of finding closure from the search of the property. Jacob's last footprints are shown on the driveway, she said. Aerial photos taken on the first day of the search showed that investigators were focusing their attention on the 5 outbuildings on the property. The operation involved as many as 17 vehicles and pieces of equipment. A special canine search dog unit was brought in from Louisiana. Investigators returned to the Razor farm with another search warrant on Thursday, July 1, 2010. They also brought in a backhoe, and several dump trucks. Six truckloads of dirt were removed from a location about 1,000 feet away from the house. The dirt was removed to the Stearns County Public Works facility to secure its inside a fenced-in locked building. A total of 4 search warrants were executed at the farm during the 2-day search. The warrants were sealed, which meant that investigators were not required to file them in court. This was to prevent the warrants from being available to the public. The St. Cloud Times expresses concern about the secretive nature of the search in a July 3, 2010 editorial acknowledging the promise of progress in the case. The Times blasted the court-ordered silence surrounding the sealed warrants. The editorial went on to criticize the SCSO for being unclear about the reasons for the gag order. The newspaper requested a copy of the judge's orders to seal the warrants, but the county attorney's office refused to request. The Times identified 3 circumstances under which the state of Minnesota allows warrants to be sealed. The first is when making search documents public would render on search unsuccessful. The second was when making the warrant public could create a risk of injury to innocent people. The third was when the warrant's disclosure would severely hamper the investigation. None of these applied, the editorial argued. On Saturday, July 3, 2010, 3 days after the search, the search of the Razor farm began. Sheriff John Sanner declared Dan Razor, age 54, a person of interest in Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. Sanner's statement marked the first time in almost 21 years that the authorities named a specific suspect. He announced that a number of items had been taken from the property. Analysts was needed to determine if they were in evidence of the crime. The process was expected to take weeks or even months. In an interview with a television news reporter, Razin himself revealed some of the items investigators have taken from the property: a cedar chest, an umbrella stand, a lawn chair, and a box containing newspaper clippings, photographs, and video related to the kidnapping. Razor also acknowledged that investigators had previously searched the property in 1989 and again in 2004. During the later, they searched the family personal computer, but now his own computer. Investigators have never revealed whether or not that search led to the discovery of any information related to the Wetterling case. Dan Razor had been a school teacher in the Rockaway School District in Cold Springs, Richmond since 1978, which is Jacob's year. Like, that's the year he was born. He acknowledged that investigators had involved him numerous times over the years. He had submitted to a DNA testing, lie detector test, and hypnosis. Razor claimed innocence of involvement in Jacob's abduction. He said he supported the search efforts and emphasized that he had been cooperative with the investigators from the beginning. He was considered, however, with how the negative attention had affected his elderly parents. For over 20 years, we have experienced our own never-ending nightmare, Razin said. We realize it's nothing like what the Wetterlings have gone through. Razor told the St. Joseph Newslander he had witnessed many particular things on the day Jacob was abducted, things that had concealed his sensed that's a hard word, in his mind as vital connections pointing the way to solving the crime. He indicated his frustration that nobody had followed through with the information he had so willingly shared with the authorities. Razor declined to specify the things he saw, saying that he had trust issues with the media. Upon further questioning, he did admit that the things he saw were people and or vehicles. He also declined to specify what he saw because he did not want to tip off any guilty of the abduction. I am an innocent witness to what happened, Razor told newsleader reporter Dennis Dalman. But I definitely saw something. All the investigators know the information I told them. Asked if he had anything to do with Jacob's abduction, Razor said, I had absolutely nothing to do with anything with Jacob. I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. As of 2010, Razor had received no complaints in 32 years of teaching, and there were no disciplinary actions in his personnel files. But the school district have been making cuts to the music program in recent years. Razor stated that while the spotlight was on him, his biggest concern was the pending budget cuts. His classroom was assigned a paraprofessional as a monitor to begin in the fall of 2010 semester. The school's principal hired the monitor as a result of parental concern. In September 2010, 3 months after a search of the search of Razor's farm, Sheriff Sander announced that no significant findings had developed. Preliminary lab results were unable to extinguish or identify potential evidence, he said. The community's renewed hope for a resolution in the case was deflated. The disappointment was not discouraging to Sander. However, he reiterated that Dan Razor remained a person of interest in the case, despite the lack of evidence developed from the July search of his residence. If I was a suspect, I wouldn't take this as a sign to relax, Sander said. This doesn't change a thing. Sander said evidence taken during the search was be retained for further testing. He believed that advances in technology could one day produce the physical evidence needed to make an arrest. The monitor that had been assigned to Dan Razor's classroom was promptly removed following Sander's announcement. After a search of his family farm, Razor began to engage himself more aggressively with the news media. He granted interviews with several newspapers and television stations. During a September 2010 review with KSTP in St. Paul, he had been forthcoming about the items taken during the research, which included ash from a burning pit and some pages from his journal. According to Razor, the ash probably contained a number of items, including animal bones the family dog had dragged in from the woods and remains of an old unwanted clothing. He said the journal entries included his thoughts on the case, and he hoped investigators would find information there to help them solve it. He pledged to do whatever he could do to help solve the case, but said he was not confident that the case could be solved. The last comment was met with scrutiny by some. The remark was interpreted as defiant, like something only a guilty person would say. What Razin meant, however, was that based on how he saw investigators handling the case, they stood little chance of solving it. He had willingly shown investigators the box of newspaper clippings and other items, and was surprised that then when they didn't ask if he had more information. Razor said investigators asked him if he or the family owned a silver handgun. He told them the family owned no handguns, only a few hunting rifles. And in an October 6, 2010 interview with Care 11, Razor said he helped research the farm's outbuildings that night of October 22nd, 1989. 1989, not 2009. After learning from Deputy Bechtold that a child had been abducted that night, Razor acknowledged that he did not have a good alibi for the time that Jacob was abducted, but that he was cooperative with police from the very beginning. He said that he had done everything possible to help investigators solve the case. In 2012, Razor made headlines again when he told the Associated Press he had written and mailed a few-page letters to 14 different investigative and state agencies. In the letter, he complained about how he had been treated by law enforcement for the past 2 years. He claimed that his civil rights had been violated and that authorities had abused their power in naming him as a person of interest in the Wetterling case. It is considered legal for law enforcement to give the public to perception I am guilty of something when I'm not, he wrote. To destroy our family's name the way they did because they had a hunch, and is it in itself a serious crime. Nothing can make it right now. The damage has been done, but to leave the whole thing open to speculation and open to the public's imagination is just wrong. Razor claimed his letter that Sheriff Sainer leaked information about him to the press in 2004, as investigators were changing their theory about the abduction. He further claimed that during the July 1, 2010 search of his family's property, Sainer twice chided himself, saying, "This is what happens when you talk." Regarding Captain Pam Jensen, Razor cited examples of why he did not trust her. He listed several concerning things that happened under Jensen's watch, including the physical assault of his mother. Razor's harshest words were for Minnesota BCA agent Ken McDonald. He said that McDonald twisted his comments out of context and used selected ideas to solve the crime. He said that McDonald pulled his elderly mother off her chair and dragged her to the floor, before finally pushing her out of the house. Razor claimed that his mother's left arm was severely bruised for a week. FBI agent Shane Ball was the lone investigator that Razor had any keywords for. He said Ball was the only one who gave Razor a business card and was willing to talk to him, although it would take several years to come to fruition. Ball's apparent willingness to listen to Razor may have been an indication of things to come in the future of the investigation. The future of the investigation. To the students and parents of Rookery High School District in Cold Spring, Dan Razor had been a full liked and respected teacher for more than 35 years. For decades, his students have affectionately known him as Mr. Beep Boop. bebop. He has no criminal record. He is considered one of the finest trumpet players in the state of Minnesota and is an avid long-distance runner. Among the people who know him personally, he is consistently described as a nice guy, the person least likely to harm another. But for Stearns County authorities as of 2015, Dan Razor was the only man ever publicly named as a person of interest of the abduction of Jacob Wetterling. Although 21 years passed before Razor was named, it is apparent that investigators considered him a suspect from the beginning. What they lacked was solid physical evidence in naming Razor a person of interest. Following the 2010 search of his family farm, Stearns County authorities relied most exclusively on circumstantial evidence and extraordinary statements from Razor himself. Of primary concern to investigators was Razor's account of the cars he said he witnessed on his driveway. On October 22, 1989, he said he told a number of investigators from the beginning that he saw two cars, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. He insisted that he had told the same story several times during the first few weeks of the investigation. The car Kevin Hamilton saw he was driving on the night of the abduction, mid-sized, light-colored, did not match the description of the vehicle Razor saw in his driveway. Small, dark-colored, Hamilton told detectives how he had turned around by the farm buildings, making a 180-degree turn to the left, just like the car Razor described. If Razor's account of the two cars was truthful, then Hamilton's car was actually the third that day to drive all the way down the long driveway and make a quick 180-degree left-hand turn. Another problem investigators had with Razor's description of the cars was that he didn't report seeing them until the next day. When detectives questioned him at his place of work, it was unclear why he didn't mention them during the two encounters he had with the police officers at his home on Sunday night and early Monday morning. This alleged delay posed a credibility problem in the eyes of investigators. By Razor's own admission, it was unusual for a car to turn away in his driveway. Yet he said he witnessed two cars doing just that on the same day. He said the cars were driving fast, especially the car he saw in the afternoon. It was puzzling then, that if the cars were indeed so out of the ordinary, that he didn't make the connection more quickly than one or both may have been involved in the kidnapping. But if Razor had informed investigators about the cars, it's unusual that the law enforcement officials made no pleas asking the public to help identify those vehicles. Investigators have made a point of publicizing the descriptions of other cars, so if Razor's story is true, why didn't they make a plea to identify the car he claimed he saw at around the time of the abduction? Razor had never retained any authority through all the years of questioning and scrutiny. He has said that he has been consistent in his story since the beginning and that he had nothing to do with the kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling. Investigators implied that he had changed his story. Another significant problem for investigators in naming Razor was that for nearly 15 years they believed that Jacob's case was related to the abduction of Jared in Cold Spring. Investigators have also suggested that Razor was a suspect from the very beginning of the Wetterling investigation. Yet Razor has said he was never questioned about Jared's abduction. If Razor could not have been Jared's assailtant, then it seems on the contrary that for so many years investigators were certain of a link between the two cases, and they have and that they consider Razor a suspect in the Wetterling case. Almost done. Indeed, the investigation into Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping never lacked for a number of possible suspects, but what was lacking was physical evidence and information from a witness or someone the abductor may have confided in. The immediate and massive media coverage of Jacob Wetterling's kidnapping in 1989 rapidly garners regional and national attention. The attention in turn led to many dead ends, leads, and false sightings across the country. In retrospect, the widespread coverage of the case probably had been an unintended consequence of direction in the investigation away from a local perspective early on. Prolonging it for years on multiple occasions, Stearns County officials indicated they had a handful of top suspects and another group of possible suspects they hadn't been able to clear in the case. But for all the efforts put forth by dozens upon dozens of investigators, as of October 2015, no one had been charged, and only one person of interest had been publicly named, Dan Razor. There were still no clues as to Jacob's whereabouts, but the search would go on, now with the help of ordinary citizens exclaiming the facts and evidence in their own home. Online sleuthers were looking for Jacob Wetterling's kidnapper, and exchanging ideas and reviewing information old and new. Man, that is long. I didn't think that'd take me an hour, but it did. Tomorrow's chapter 8. And don't forget to thank you so much for watching. I know it was a long video, but I hope tomorrow's chapter is shorter. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, comment, and like. And remember to dare to dream, guys.